I was never the type of girl who drew attention. While others sported shiny backpacks and new clothes every season, I was content with what I found on the clearance shelves of the local supermarket. My name is Emily, and for a long time, I believed that being invisible was the same as being safe. Little did I know that sometimes being invisible is what hurts the most. I remember the first day of school at that enormous school in Austin, Texas. The walls seemed to gleam, and the cars that dropped the children off were so luxurious they looked like something out of a movie. I gripped the worn strap of my backpack tightly, feeling my heart pounding, as if I knew something there wouldn't be easy. Before continuing, I want to say that I ask God to bless you with all His infinite love, giving you much health, peace, joy, and faith, because we can never lose faith in God, for He will never abandon us, because His love is eternal and infinite. I also take this opportunity to ask you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. This helps me a lot, thank you. The sound of laughter was the soundtrack to my first day. They laughed at me, at my old uniform, my patched shoes, even my hair tied up in a simple bow that my mother had made with so much love. I pretended not to hear, but the words pierced me like thorns. "Look, the orphan from the poor neighborhood," one of them whispered, without imagining that that phrase would echo within me for years. At the back of the room, I sat alone. The teacher seemed kind, but even he couldn't hide his curious gaze when he noticed that my snack was just a sandwich wrapped in recycled paper. In that instant, I realized that the world isn't kind to those who come from humble backgrounds. Each day, I grew more silent. My notebooks were my refuge, the place where I could dream without fear. I drew grand houses, beautiful dresses, dinners with people who loved me. I dreamed of a father who might still be out there somewhere, searching for me. But while I was dreaming, the real world seemed to be mocking me. Madison and Claire, the queens of the school, made a point of reminding me every day of my place. "Emily, what are you doing here? This school is for real people," they would say, between laughs that made me want to disappear. I pretended not to hear, but my chest burned. Sometimes, I would go home by bus, crying softly, trying not to draw attention. That's when Mr. Jack, the driver, started to notice me. A man with a calm smile and kind eyes, who always said, "God puts the right people in your path, girl. Hang in there." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I just thought he was trying to comfort me. But something in the way he looked at me, it was as if he recognized me. As if he had known me for a long time. The years went by, and with them, my hope crumbled. I no longer cried. The heart gets used to the pain. I learned to walk with my head down, to enter and leave classes unnoticed. Only Mr. Jack continued to speak to me, asking how I was, giving me candies on the days when I seemed saddest. One day, he told me something I'll never forget. "Emily, sometimes God takes His time, but He never fails." At that moment, those words seemed beautiful, but distant, like a promise made to someone better than me. The girls continued to humiliate me, and time seemed frozen in 5 long years of shame. But I endured it, for myself, for my mother, and for a faith that, even wavering, still breathed within me. On certain days, I imagined running away, leaving and never looking back. But something held me back. Perhaps it was the hope that, one day, all of this would make sense. It was on a rainy afternoon that I realized how much fate likes to play with time. I was sitting alone at the bus stop, holding my wet books, when Mr. Jack stopped the bus and opened the door with a smile. "Come in, Emily. You don't pay today." I laughed. "But I never pay, Mr. Jack." He winked. "Today is different." I sat in the front row, watching the raindrops slide down the window. The silence was broken by soft music coming from the bus's old radio, a song my mother used to sing. It gave me goosebumps. "You look tired, girl," he said. I just shook my head. 5 years is too long to endure so much. I didn't understand how he knew that. He didn't usually count the days, much less the years. But there was something in his voice, something that made me believe he knew more than he let on. As the bus drove along the wet road, I felt a strange peace. A sense that something was about to change, like the wind before the storm. That night, when I got home, I found my mother sitting at the table, with a different expression, something between fear and relief. She was holding a yellowed envelope that looked like it had traveled for decades. "Emily," she whispered, "this is for you." I looked at the envelope, and my heart raced. The paper smelled of the past, and the lettering was drawn with an old-fashioned elegance. The signature, just an initial, R. I can't explain it, but at that moment, something inside me awakened. A deep, almost sacred curiosity. Who was R? Why would you write to me? I put the envelope in my backpack, never imagining that this small piece of paper would be the beginning of a turning point that would change my whole life. And while I slept that night, without answers, Mr. Jack prayed silently inside his empty bus. He knew the time of revelations was coming, and that the name Emily was about to mean far more than anyone could imagine. In the days that followed, that envelope wouldn't leave my mind. I hid it inside a math book, the only place where no one would ever look for something of value. Sometimes, during class, I would discreetly open the book just to look at the yellowed paper, like someone observing a secret still dormant. But life didn't give me time for mysteries. At that school, every day was a silent battle. The girls seemed to enjoy inventing new ways to embarrass me. They would push me in the hallway, whisper as I passed by, and sometimes tear up my notebooks. I never fought back. Not because I was a coward, but because deep down I believed that God saw everything. And that one day, He would show me the reason for so much pain. The teachers pretended not to see. It was easier that way. Nobody wanted to confront the daughters of the richest men in town. And me? I just wanted to survive another day. My mother worked double shifts at a laundromat. She would arrive late, exhausted, but still find the strength to smile. "Don't give up, Emily," she would say. "The Lord honors those who remain faithful." I pretended to believe her, even when my heart was bleeding. On the hardest days, it was Mr. Jack who could bring a smile to my face. He always waited for me in the same front seat. He had a gift for making me feel that, somehow, I mattered. Sometimes he would tell me stories from his youth, about when he was friends with a rich man who lost everything for love. I thought it was beautiful, but I never imagined how much that story connected to mine. 5 years is too long to pretend everything's all right. Enough time to lose innocence and learn to be silent. I learned to become invisible, and being invisible became my shield. Gradually, I began writing letters to myself. Letters I never sent. I spoke to God in them. I asked Him to explain why He had placed me there, among people who hated me for no reason. Sometimes, I ended up crying. Other times, I just smiled resignedly. Madison and Claire, the 2 girls who tormented me the most, seemed to take pleasure in seeing me break down. One day, they spilled milk on my backpack. Another, they stuck a note on my chair that read, "Trash has no place here." I sat down anyway, trying to prove to myself that I was stronger than that. But the truth is, it hurt. It hurt more than I could show. There were nights when I slept with a wet pillow, repeating softly, "One day, all this will pass." I clung to small signs, a beautiful sunset, a smile from Mr. Jack, the sound of the wind rustling through the trees in the yard. They were silent reminders that God still saw me, even when the world ignored me. One morning I arrived at school and found my locker defaced with red paint. Poor thing! The word flowed like blood. I stood there, staring. No one helped. Even the teacher walked by and looked away. It was then that I realized, sometimes, the silence of others hurts more than insults. When the bell rang, I ran to the bathroom and washed my face. I looked in the mirror and almost didn't recognize myself. There was a new strength in me, something that grew along with the pain. A certainty I didn't yet know how to name. That same day, Mr. Jack was waiting for me with a different look on his face. He seemed worried. "Emily, the world can be cruel, but the truth always comes out. Always." He spoke slowly, as if testing the weight of each word. I just shook my head, not understanding. The truth? What truth? That night, I opened the envelope from R. for the first time. My hands were trembling. Inside was just one sheet of paper, handwritten in an old-fashioned script, "For my little girl, wherever she may be. Blood speaks, even when time is silent." I read and reread those words dozens of times. Who was that man? Why was he calling me my girl? I showed the letter to my mother, but she paled and looked away. "I don't want to talk about it, Emily. Put it away and forget about it." But I couldn't forget. That night, I dreamed of a large house, a porch with flowers, and a man in a suit smiling at me. When I woke up, the pillow was wet, from tears or faith, I didn't know. The following months were the hardest. Madison threw a party and invited the whole class, except me. The next day, they posted photos of themselves laughing, with cruel captions. "Not everyone was born to shine," they wrote. I pretended I didn't care, but inside, I was falling apart. The only place where I still felt at peace was on the bus, next to Mr. Jack. He would sometimes give me little notes with Bible verses. One of them stuck in my memory: "The humble will be exalted." Those words became my invisible shield. I silently repeated them every time someone hurt me: "The humble will be exalted." One day, as I was getting on the bus, I noticed that Mr. Jack was looking at me differently. Not like a driver looks at a passenger, but like someone protecting a secret. When our eyes met, he smiled and said, "You have more than you realize, Emily. Much more." I laughed, thinking it was just a way to console myself. But there was something in his voice, something that vibrated with truth. The years went by, and graduation was approaching. I counted the days until I could get out of that school, not knowing that it would be there, in front of everyone, that the past would resurface with force. One afternoon, Mr. Jack called me over before I got off the bus. "Emily, do you believe that God writes straight with crooked lines?" I said yes, without understanding the reason for the question. He simply replied, "Then get ready. The lines are about to straighten out." That night, I felt a strange unease. It was as if something invisible was moving around me. I went to sleep with the feeling that time was finally about to reveal to me what it had always hidden. But before I could understand what was to come, fate would bring me face to face with pain one last time, and with a secret that would change everything. The days seemed to repeat themselves, one after another, with the same pain and the same silence. But among all the faces that crossed my path, there was one that never changed: Mr. Jack's. He was the only one who looked at me without judgment, the only one who saw beyond my simple clothes and my shyness. There was something about him that calmed me. Maybe it was his husky, gentle voice, or the way he always called me "strong girl," even when I felt broken inside. He seemed to carry within him a silent wisdom, the kind that only comes with time and pain. Sometimes I'd get on the bus and find a candy on the seat. Other times, a folded note with phrases like, "Keep believing," or "What's yours will find its way back." I never asked if he was the one who left them, but deep down, I knew. One morning, as I gazed out the window at the sunrise gilding the rooftops of Austin, he broke the silence. "Emily, have you ever wondered why God allows certain people to suffer so much?" I was at a loss for words. He continued, "Perhaps because suffering is the only place where character flourishes, and where faith ceases to be just words and becomes life." Those words stayed with me all day. For the first time, I felt that someone understood the pain I was carrying, not to console me, but to remind me that it had a purpose. As the months passed, our friendship grew naturally, almost sacredly. I waited for the bus not only to escape the stares of the school, but to listen to the stories he told. He talked about when he was young, about roads he traveled, and about a man who lost everything except his faith. "His name was Richard," he once said. "A good man, but surrounded by greedy people. He had a daughter, but lost her when she was still a baby." I felt a strange chill run down my spine. "He never found her?" I asked. Jack looked away, thoughtful. "I don't think so, but he never stopped looking." After that conversation, I started observing Mr. Jack more closely. He had an overly protective manner, a care that went beyond simple kindness. Sometimes, I caught him looking at me in the rear-view mirror, as if trying to decipher a mystery. The humiliations at school continued, but they no longer affected me in the same way. I had found a small refuge in that old yellow bus. It was the only place where I could breathe without fear. One afternoon, while we were waiting for the light to change, he handed me a small blue-covered book. "It's an old Bible. It belonged to my best friend. I think you should have it." I opened the book and found, on the first few pages, a name written by hand. Richard Hayes. My heart stopped for a second. It was the same name as the initial R on the letter. "Jack, who is Richard Hayes?" I asked, feeling my stomach churn. He hesitated before answering. A man who trusted the wrong people too much, and paid dearly for it. I didn't insist. But that night, I opened the Bible in bed and, between the yellowed pages, I found another letter, identical to the one I had received. The handwriting was the same. And at the end, the same signature, R. My whole body trembled. I showed the letter to my mother, and she turned pale. "Where did you get this, Emily?" she asked, almost voiceless. When I told her that Jack had given me the book, she was silent for a long time. Then she murmured, "There are things that time cannot erase." The next day, I tried to ask Jack about the letter, but he changed the subject. "Not everything should be revealed ahead of time, Emily. The right time comes when the heart is ready to listen." That confused me. What kind of secret could he be keeping? Weeks passed, and something inside me began to change. I no longer saw my poverty as a source of shame, but as part of the story God was writing with me. Faith began to become my strength, and I clung to it like someone holding onto a rope in the midst of a storm. On a cold December morning, I boarded the bus and noticed Jack was different. There was a glint in his eyes, as if he carried good news. "Emily," he said, "never stop believing that there's more to your story than what others see." He smiled, without imagining the prophetic weight of those words. That same week, I found a forgotten box on the back seat of the bus. It was covered with an old cloth, as if someone wanted to hide it. The lid creaked, and inside were dozens of letters, all on the same yellowed paper, all signed R. My heart raced. "Jack, what's this?" I asked, showing him the box. He was speechless. He looked at me for a few seconds, and then said something I'll never forget. "The truth is never lost, Emily. Sometimes it just waits for the right moment to be heard." I stared at him, trying to understand what it meant. "These letters, were they yours?" I asked in a whisper. He shook his head. "No, girl. But I promised I would take care of them, and of whoever they belonged to." The silence that followed was almost sacred. I felt there was something enormous hidden there, something that connected his past to mine. I couldn't sleep that night. I picked up the oldest letter from the box and began to read. The words were gentle, full of love and regret. They spoke of a lost daughter, of a mistake made many years ago, and of a promise of reunion. I cried reading every line, feeling a connection I couldn't explain. It was as if those words had been written for me. The next morning, when I told Mr. Jack this, he just looked at me tenderly and said, "Then maybe they were, Emily. Maybe they were meant for you." My whole body shivered. He knew something, but his gaze said it wasn't time to reveal it yet. From that day on, I realized that my story wasn't as simple as I thought. That driver, who seemed like just a kind friend, was at the center of a secret that time had hidden, and that was now beginning to unfold, piece by piece. And although I didn't understand everything, something inside me told me that destiny was about to bring me face to face with the truth. I spent the whole week thinking about the letters. It was as if each word written on that yellowed paper whispered a forgotten piece of my own soul. I read and reread them, and the more I read, the more I felt there was something there, something that belonged to me, even if I didn't know why. I began keeping the letters under my pillow, like someone protecting a treasure. At night, before going to sleep, I would ask God to show me what they meant. And in my dreams, I always saw the same face, a tall man with kind eyes and a sad smile. One day, I arrived early at the bus stop. Mr. Jack was already there, calmly cleaning the windshield. I waited a few seconds before speaking. "Jack, who was Richard Hayes really?" He stopped moving, looked at the ground, and replied softly, "A man with a broken heart, but with unbreakable faith." "And these letters?" I insisted. "Why were they on the bus?" He took a deep breath. "Because it was the last place he believed they would be found." I remained silent, not understanding. "But by whom?" I asked. Jack looked at me intently and replied, "By the only person who could still understand what he wrote." That phrase echoed in my head all day. I tried to concentrate in class, but I couldn't. Jack's voice kept coming back to my mind, like a warning, a premonition of something bigger. That afternoon, I went back to the bus and asked to stay after the last shift. I wanted to talk without feeling rushed. He agreed, with that same calm and enigmatic look. When the last student got off, I sat in the first seat, next to him. Jack, why do I feel like there's something wrong with me? Like the whole world knows a truth I don't. He was silent for a while, then said, "Because maybe they do, Emily. They just haven't told you yet." Those words left me in shock. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. He turned on the radio, playing an old song, the same one we listened to the day he gave me a ride in the rain. "That song," I began to say. He finished, "It was his favorite. Richard." My heart raced. This couldn't be a coincidence. "Jack, you knew him, didn't you?" He looked ahead, his hands firm on the steering wheel. "Yes. And I knew the woman he loved most, too." Suddenly, a faded childhood memory came to mind, a female voice singing that same song while I played with rag dolls. A soft, sad voice. "Mommy," I murmured. When I got home, I couldn't contain myself. I asked her straight away, "Mom, did you meet a man named Richard Hayes?" She was silent for a few seconds, then replied, "Why are you asking that?" "Because I found letters from him, Mom. And he talks about a daughter. A daughter he lost." She started crying before I finished the sentence. "Emily, there are things the heart tries to forget in order to survive." I sat down beside her, confused and scared. "What does this mean? Who was he to you?" She looked up, her eyes brimming with tears, and said, "He was the man who gave you your name." My body went cold. "Are you saying he was my father?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes. But he never knew." The world seemed to spin. I stood up, unsure what to think. The letters, the name, the music, everything made sense now. Richard Hayes was my father. And Jack? Jack knew all along. I ran to the bus that same night. It was still parked in the school garage, as if waiting for me. "You knew?" I cried, sobbing. "You knew from the beginning." He didn't deny it. He just took off his hat and said, "I promised him, Emily. I promised I would protect you until the day fate took it upon itself to tell you the truth." "Why? Why didn't you tell me before?" I asked, sobbing. "Because your mother asked me not to. She wanted to spare you the pain of knowing that he died looking for you." I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. "He died." Jack nodded slowly. 17 years ago. But he left everything to you." I didn't understand right away. "Everything what?" He took a deep breath and pulled a thick envelope from his coat pocket. Inside were old documents, notary stamps, and a final letter from Richard. The first lines read, "If my daughter ever finds these words, I want her to know that everything I have belongs to her. I didn't leave her a fortune, I left her love. But if God allows, one day she will know that she was rich in everything that money can't buy." Tears streamed down my face, and Jack placed his hand on my shoulder. "Emily, he didn't just leave behind love. He left a legacy. A legacy the whole world tried to hide." "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice weak. "You'll understand soon. But what's written in those letters is just the beginning." That night, as I walked home with the envelope in my hands, my heart was torn between pain and a hope I didn't know if I deserved. Everything I thought I knew about who I was crumbling. And yet, there was something inside me that told me the best, or the worst, was yet to come. Because sometimes God doesn't just rewrite history. He reveals it at the exact right time, when the heart can no longer bear to live in the shadow of doubt. That morning, the sun seemed brighter than usual. Perhaps it was just my imagination, but I felt the world had changed, or perhaps it was I who no longer fit into the same life. I was still holding the envelope Mr. Jack had given me. My hands were sweating, and my heart was beating so loudly I could hear it. I couldn't go to school that day. I sat in my backyard, with the documents spread out before me. The letters, the stamps, the signatures, everything pointed to one name: Richard Hayes, the same man from the letters, the same man from the ancient Bible, the same man from my dreams. I opened the final letter Jack had kept for so long. The words were worn, but the feeling still pulsed within them. "My daughter, if you ever read this, know that I haven't forgotten you for a single day of my life. I was deceived, betrayed, and silenced, but I never gave up on finding you. God willing, may someone good, someone who truly loves you, give you this paper. They will know what to do." My whole body trembled. The handwriting was firm, beautiful. I ran my finger over the letters, trying to sense something of the man who wrote them. For the first time, I felt that my heart had found a source. I ran to the bus, even though it wasn't class time. Jack was there, as always, sitting behind the wheel, staring into space. "Jack." I read the letter. He slowly turned his face toward me. There were tears in his eyes, but also a profound sense of relief. "So now you know, girl. Richard Hayes was your father. And not just any man." I sat in the front seat, barely able to breathe. "What do you mean by that?" "He owned one of the largest oil companies in Texas. A man of faith, but surrounded by wolves. When the woman he loved became pregnant, those close to him betrayed him. They made him believe the baby had died. This woman was his mother." The ground seemed to disappear. "So, she lied to him?" Jack shook his head. "No. She was forced. There were powerful people interested in his money, and they knew that if Richard found out the truth, he would leave everything to you. So they hid you, and said she abandoned you." My heart broke into 1,000 pieces. "And he died thinking I was dead?" Jack took a deep breath. "Yes. But he never stopped looking for you. And when he got sick, he gave me the mission of finding you. I promised." I felt the tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. "You found me, Jack. But why did you wait so long to tell me?" "Because your mother asked me to. She was afraid of losing you. I couldn't choose between two promises, protecting you and protecting the truth." I stood silent, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. The warm afternoon breeze swayed the trees, and I could swear I heard Richard's voice somewhere, a distant memory that now made sense. "Did he leave me anything?" I asked, still confused. Jack nodded and pulled a small metal safe from under the bench. "Inside this is proof of who you are. And more, the keys to the house where he lived. It's yours, Emily." "And not only that." "Not only that," I repeated, trying to understand. "You are the sole rightful heir to his fortune. And I'm not talking about a small amount of money. He left $100 million in assets and investments, all in your name, held safe until you were found." I felt the air disappear. 100 million? That sounded impossible. "That doesn't make sense, Jack. I barely have enough money for school lunch." "I know. But the world likes to hide its most precious things in the most unlikely places. And you, Emily, were Texas' best-kept secret." My whole body was trembling. I didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or faint. $100 million. The name of a father I never knew. A mother who protected me with her silence. And a driver who, in reality, was the guardian of a legacy that time had almost erased. He opened the safe. Inside, besides the papers, there was an old photograph. A tall, smiling man, holding a baby in his arms. Me. It was me. The same hair ribbon, the same look. I touched the photo and felt a mixture of love and longing for someone I never hugged. "Did he love me that much, Jack?" I asked. "More than life itself," he replied. "And now it's time for the world to know who you are." "But what about school? And the people who humiliated me? What will happen when they find out?" Jack looked at me tenderly. "The same thing that always happens when God decides to exalt those who have been humiliated. They'll have to watch." That phrase kept hammering in my head for the rest of the day. Me, the poor girl, the invisible one, the one who had been the butt of jokes for 5 years. I was the daughter of a millionaire. Suddenly, everything that once made me feel small now seemed part of a perfect plan. A divine plan, written with tears, faith, and silence. But something inside me still ached, not for myself, but for my mother. I knew that the truth that set me free was the same truth that hurt her. That night, when I got home, she was waiting for me, sitting there as if she knew I'd found out everything. "He was a good man, Emily. I just wanted to protect you from a world that hurt us." I hugged her tightly, feeling love and regret mixed together. "I know, Mom. And I forgive you." But deep down, a new unease was growing. Jack had spoken as if there was more, something that had not yet been revealed. And I knew, deep down in my heart, that the secret wasn't complete yet. Because when God begins to reveal the truth, he never stops halfway. The prom was the most anticipated event in school. Everyone had been talking about it for months, as if it were the pinnacle of teenage life. For me, it was just the end of a cycle I wanted to forget. I didn't have a new dress, expensive shoes, or an official invitation, but I had something no one else there had, the truth. Ever since I discovered who I was, something changed inside me. I still wore the same uniform and the same worn-out shoes, but my gaze had changed. There was light where there had once been fear. And perhaps that was what bothered Madison and Claire so much. They noticed. They realized I wasn't the same girl who used to shrink away when they laughed at me. They started whispering in the hallways, trying to understand the reason for my silent peace. Peace, to people like them, was provocation. "She thinks she's somebody now," I heard Claire say one morning. "The poor thing must have gone completely mad." Madison smiled with that venomous grin that only she had. "We'll find a way to remind her of her place." Their words didn't affect me, but somehow I sensed that something was being prepared. It was like the silence before the storm, that moment when the air grows heavy and instinct warns, something bad is coming. My mother insisted I go to the ball. "You deserve to experience this moment, daughter. Not for them, but for yourself." I agreed, even though I was scared. I borrowed a dress from the neighbor, simple but beautiful. Light blue, with a lace detail that reminded me of the sky. On the night of the ball, Mr. Jack insisted on taking me. "Every princess needs a dignified entrance," he said, smiling. I laughed, thrilled. He was more elegant than usual, with an old tie and polished shoes. "You look beautiful, Emily. Today is the beginning of something great." As the bus drove along the illuminated streets, I felt my heart beat faster. I thought of my father, of everything I had discovered. And I prayed softly, "Lord, give me strength. May I not lose faith today." When I arrived, the gym was packed. Colorful lights, loud music, and laughter everywhere. I tried to go unnoticed, but I soon felt the stares. Some girls were whispering, and the boys were just watching. I pretended not to see. When I spotted Madison and Claire, my stomach clenched. They looked stunning, in expensive dresses and flawless makeup. And when they saw me, they exchanged a quick, almost knowing glance. The kind of look that precedes poison. I went to the back table, trying to be alone. Jack had promised to come back for me later. He said he needed to sort something important out first, something about the right time to tell the truth. On stage, the director spoke about dreams and achievements. I tried to listen, but my heart was restless. I felt something stirring around me. Suddenly, the lights went out. The sound of the malfunctioning microphone echoed through the gymnasium. Low laughter spread. When the lights came back on, I realized everyone was looking at me. On the screen, a photo. Me, as a child, in simple clothes, holding a grocery bag. Then, another image, my patched uniform. And a cruel caption, "The Queen of Trash." The collective laughter was like a knife. I was paralyzed. Madison and Claire were in the corner, smiling, holding their phones. They had planned it. They had waited for the perfect moment. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I felt my face burning, my heart racing. Everything was spinning. "Look who thought she could be one of us!" Claire shouted, laughing. "You should be grateful, Emily. We gave you the spotlight you never would have had." Laughter echoed, and the world seemed to shrink. I felt small again, like in my first days of school. But this time, something was different. Something inside me refused to break. While everyone laughed, I looked up. I felt tears falling, but they weren't tears of shame. They were tears of liberation. I murmured softly, "The humble will be exalted." The silence began to grow. Some students seemed uncomfortable. Others, confused. The light moved towards me, and at that instant, I heard the familiar sound of an engine outside. It was the bus. The old school bus. The doors opened slowly, and Jack entered the gymnasium. In a suit, with a firm gaze. The sound of laughter ceased. He walked to the stage, unhurriedly. No one understood what was happening. Madison tried to say something, but her voice failed her. "Good evening," he said, his voice deep. "Excuse the interruption, but there's a truth that needs to be said today." The gymnasium fell into absolute silence. I couldn't breathe. Jack looked at me, and his gaze said it all. He knew this was the moment. "For 5 years," he began, "you have laughed, mocked, and humiliated this girl. But what no one here knows is that she carries a name that many of you revere, the name of a righteous, honest, and blessed man." They all looked at each other, confused. Jack took a deep breath, and his voice steadied. "His name was Richard Hayes. And this girl is his daughter." A murmur rippled through the hall. Students, teachers, even the principal, everyone froze. Madison let out a nervous laugh. "This is a joke, right?" The drivers lost his mind. Jack held up the envelope I had been holding for weeks. "These documents prove it. She is Richard Hayes' sole heir, and the owner of everything he left behind. $100 million. The silence that followed was deafening. It was as if the air had been ripped from the academy. I stared at Jack, unable to move. People were watching me now with the same eyes that had previously despised me, eyes of fear, admiration, and regret. And, for the first time, I felt the weight of divine justice. The world had turned upside down, right there, before everyone's eyes. Jack held out his hand to me. "Time to go, Emily." I took her hand and walked to the door, under the gaze of the one who once made me cry. But before leaving, I turned and said, in a calm voice, "I hold no grudge. I just hope that one day you will learn what true love is." The doors closed behind us, and the sounds of the gymnasium faded into the distance. Outside, the air was light, and the sky was full of stars. But something inside me told me that the story wasn't over yet. Because, even though the truth had come to light, the past still held secrets. And Mr. Jack, he still hadn't told me everything. The sound of the old bus engine echoed softly on the empty road. The school lights were already behind us, small and distant, like memories that had finally lost their power to hurt. I looked out the window, trying to understand everything that had happened. Jack's words still echoed in my head. "She is Richard Hayes' daughter." They seemed unreal as the silence that now enveloped us. "Did you know you were going to do this today?" I asked, my voice still trembling. He kept his eyes fixed on the road. "I knew this day would come, Emily. I just didn't know when God's heart would tell me it was time." We remained silent for a few minutes. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, and the moonlight painted his face silver. For the first time, I realized how tired Mr. Jack looked. But there was something more to that tiredness, something I still couldn't decipher. "Why did you care so much about me, Jack?" I asked softly. "You could have delivered the letters and left. Why did you stay?" He let out a long sigh, like someone carrying an old weight. "Because I promised. And because I owed you this." The words hung in the air. Should I what?" He looked at me, and the glint in his eyes made me shudder. "Your life, Emily." I remained silent, trying to understand. "What do you mean by that?" Jack slowed the bus down and pulled over to the side of the road. The engine sound ceased. The silence was absolute. He rested his hands on the steering wheel and closed his eyes for a moment. "Before I became a bus driver," he began, "I worked for your father. I was his personal driver, his trusted confidant. I was with him through the best and worst days. My heart raced. You really met him more than anyone else. I saw his love for his mother blossom, and I saw the world turn against him when she disappeared. I watched him wither away searching for you." Tears started streaming down my face before I even realized it. "And did you know where we were?" "No. I only found out many years later. And when I did, your mother begged me to keep it a secret. She was scared, Emily. Scared of the people who had tried to destroy your father, and who might still be around." "Who were these people?" He hesitated. "Former partners. Powerful people. They manipulated everything, forged documents, and stole the inheritance that was rightfully yours. When Richard died, They swore you would never be found. My whole body went cold. So, that's why you stayed close to me? It was more than that. He placed his hand on his chest, taking a deep breath. Richard saved me once, when I was lost. He gave me a job, dignity, and faith. I promised that, if I could one day, I would return the favor. And when I met you, I understood that this was my life's mission. I stared at him, my heart aching. But how did he find me? By chance, or perhaps by providence. One morning, I saw your mother walking down the street with a little girl, you. I recognized Richard's eyes immediately. I knew it was you. Tears blinded me. And you stayed around all this time? Yes. Pretending to be just an ordinary driver, to protect you. Because there was more at stake than just money. There was a promise between two friends, and a love that never died. I sat down slowly, trying to process everything. Jack, you loved him, didn't you? He nodded, his voice choked with emotion. Like a brother. Richard was everything I never was. Fair, generous, loyal. When he died, I promised before his coffin that I would find you and take care of you until the last day of my life. My chest tightened. And you delivered. He smiled. Not quite yet. There's something else you need to know. My body froze. More. Richard knew he didn't have much time left. So he left something prepared. A will, yes, but also a letter. A letter he wrote in his final days, addressed to you. And I kept it, waiting for the right moment. Jack opened the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a worn envelope. The same kind of yellowed paper as the other letters. Here it is. He wrote it with his own hand. I picked up the envelope carefully. The paper seemed to vibrate between my fingers. There was something sacred about that moment, as if time had stopped. I opened it slowly. The handwriting was the same, firm and full of feeling. My daughter, if this letter ever reaches you, I want you to know that I never owned anything. Everything the world gave me, money, power, name, I would trade for a minute by your side. But God's love taught me that time cannot steal what is eternal. If you ever find Jack, trust him. He is the bridge between my past and your future. Tears streamed down the paper, blurring the words. Jack stared ahead, unable to look at me. He believed in you, Emily, he said softly. And he believed that the pain that shaped you would be the same pain that would lead you to grace. I hugged him. It was a long, silent hug, full of everything that words can't express. Thank you, Jack. For staying. For keeping what was mine safe. For believing in me when even I didn't believe in myself. He smiled, his eyes welling up with tears. Don't thank me. Faith is what kept me alive to see this day. But as the bus returned to the road, I noticed something different in his gaze. A shadow, a silent pain hidden among the wrinkles. Jack, is there anything else I need to know? I asked, my heart racing. He didn't answer immediately. He just looked in the rearview mirror and whispered, as if speaking to time itself, Yes, Emily. There's something I can only tell you once. Something that changes everything you think about me, and about your father. The engine roared, and the wind rushed into the bus. I stared at it, sensing that this was the beginning of another revelation, one that could change everything again. And at that moment, I understood, however much the truth liberates, it can also hurt. Destiny had not yet finished speaking. Going back to that school after everything felt like a strange dream. It was the same building, the same hallways, the same smell of coffee and paint, but nothing was the same anymore. I was no longer the girl who walked with her head down and avoided stares. I now knew who I was. On the way, Mr. Jack drove in silence. With each mile, I felt the weight of the story receding. Are you sure you want to go back there? He asked, with a protective look. Yes, I replied. Not to show anything to anyone, but to finish what God has already finished. The school seemed suspended in time. Some students looked at me with curiosity, others with regret. The same voices that had previously called me poor thing now murmured in a low, almost reverent tone. I wasn't wearing an expensive dress or makeup. I chose the old uniform, the same one I always wore. I wanted them to understand that the wealth I carried wasn't contained in fabrics or jewels. It was something else, invisible, eternal. When I entered the room, the silence was immediate. Even the sound of the fans seemed to stop. Madison and Claire were there, in the back, motionless, with vacant stares. Neither of them dared to say a word. The professor greeted me with an awkward smile. "Emily, it's so good to see you here." I returned the smile kindly. "Thank you, Mr. Parker." I promised myself I would end this cycle with gratitude, not anger. Classes dragged on slowly. Every corner of the school brought back memories, some good, some painful. I remembered the times I cried in the bathroom, the cruel laughter, the whispered prayers between notebooks. All of that now seemed distant, almost like another life. At lunchtime, I sat on my usual bench under the tree beside the patio. That's where Jack appeared, with his calm demeanor and that smile that seemed to know more than he let on. "You did it, girl," he said, sitting down next to me. "To come back here, look at all this and not let the hatred consume you, that's rare." She smiled. "It wasn't easy. But I learned that forgiving isn't about forgetting what they did to us. It's about choosing not to let it define us." He nodded, proudly. "Your father would be very proud." I looked up at the sky and felt a lump in my throat. "I feel him here, Jack. It's like he's still guiding me." "He guides," he replied. "And there are more people guiding you than you realize." That phrase intrigued me, but before I could ask, the bell rang. Jack stood up, adjusted his cap, and said, "I'll be back later. There's still something you need to see." The hours passed, and when class ended, the principal called me into his office. "Emily," he said in a trembling voice, "I would like to apologize. On behalf of the school. We turned a blind eye to many things. And now we know who you are." I took a deep breath. "With all due respect, sir, I don't want to be treated differently because of my last name. I want any child who is humiliated to be treated differently, regardless of how much money they have." He remained silent, unsure what to say. I left there with a light heart. For the first time, I felt I had accomplished a mission. Outside, Jack's bus was waiting for me. I got in and sat in my usual seat. The sunset painted the interior of the vehicle with a golden, almost sacred glow. Jack looked at me in the mirror. "You know, Emily, sometimes what God wants isn't for us to defeat others, but to overcome what hatred could have done to us." I nodded, moved. "I won, Jack. Not the world, but myself." The bus continued down the road, and for the first time in a long time, I laughed. A light, free, almost childlike laugh. But then I noticed something strange. On the dashboard, there was an old photo taped in place. It was a picture of Richard Hayes, and next to him, Jack. Much younger, smiling. "Jack, is that you?" I asked, surprised. He smiled. "Yes. That day was the last I saw him alive." "Were you with him?" "Yes. And it was there that I promised to take care of what he loved most." I looked at the photo again. They were in front of a huge white house, surrounded by flowers. Behind them, an old car with an iron license plate. Hayes Estate. Jack noticed my gaze. "That house still exists, Emily. And it's time you saw it." My heart raced. "You mean, now?" "Yes." His will stated that when you forgave, the legacy would be fully revealed. "And you forgave." The bus turned onto a country road, lined with tall trees. The wind streamed in through the windows, carrying a sweet scent of jasmine. I felt my heart pounding, as if destiny was about to open a new door. When the vehicle stopped, I saw before me an old mansion, imposing but full of life. The windows gleamed, and the iron gate opened as if it had been waiting for me. I got off the bus, my legs trembling. "She's beautiful," I murmured. Jack approached, smiling. "She's yours, Emily. Every brick, every flower, every memory. And there's something inside waiting for you." "Something?" I asked, confused. He nodded, his eyes welling up with tears. "Something your father asked me to deliver personally, when I felt you were ready." Before I could ask what it was, the wind blew strongly, and a door opened by itself, as if the house were calling me. I took a step forward, feeling that this moment marked the end of one cycle and the beginning of another. But deep down, a doubt began to grow in my heart. Something about Jack's tone of voice sounded different. As if there were yet another truth waiting to be told. And I knew, destiny had not yet revealed its last secret. The mansion seemed alive. Every step I took echoed through the hallways, as if the place breathed with me. The walls smelled of time, a mixture of old wood and cherished memories. Jack walked beside me, silent, holding a small wooden box. "This house has belonged to the Hayes family for generations," he said, as we passed a large portrait on the wall. In the painting, a young man with a steady gaze and a discreet smile stood next to another man, older, with the same kind look as Jack. I stopped in front of the portrait. "Who are they?" Jack took a deep breath. "The youngest is Richard. The other," he paused, "is my father." I stared at him, surprised. "Your father?" "Yes." He smiled, with a melancholy that was hard to hide. "And that's why this story was never just about what you lost, Emily, but also about what I lost." We walked down a narrow corridor to a room lit only by the light filtering through the curtains. Jack placed the box on the table. "Before you open it, I need to tell you something I've kept to myself for over 40 years. I sat in silence, my heart pounding. "When I was young," he began, "my father worked for the Hayes. He was their driver, just as I was later. Richard and I grew up together, almost like brothers. But when my father died, his family took me in. It was Richard who taught me to read, who gave me my first car, and who saved me from myself." "From yourself?" I asked. He nodded. "I was a lost boy, without faith, without direction. Richard pulled me out of the darkness. And that's why, when he fell in love with his mother, I did everything I could to help him. But there was a secret I never told him." My heart tightened. "What secret, Jack?" He looked at me with teary eyes. "Richard wasn't an only child." I was in shock. "What do you mean?" "My father had 2 sons, Richard and I." The silence seemed to freeze the air between us. "Are you saying that?" "Yes, Emily." He smiled, tears streaming down his face. "I'm Richard Hayes' brother. His blood runs in me, and in you." I felt the ground disappear beneath my feet. "So, you are your uncle." His words echoed through the room, slow, almost sacred. My whole body trembled. "This means that—" "It means I didn't just promise to protect a friend's daughter, Emily. I promised to protect my family's blood. You are my niece, the last Hayes." I stared at him, unable to speak. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. "I tried to tell you before, but your mother was afraid. She thought that if the world knew, they would come after you, like they came after Richard." "So, you knew from the beginning?" "From the first day I saw you getting on that bus, I saw my brother's eyes in you. And I understood that God had spared me just to fulfill this mission, to bring the Hayes name back into the light." Emotion overwhelmed me. Everything made sense now, the care, the words, the protective gaze. Jack was never just a generous stranger. He was part of the story. Part of me. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I asked, crying. "Because I needed you to be strong enough to listen. The Hayes bloodline carries as much power as pain. And if I had told you sooner, perhaps you wouldn't have been ready to carry the name with humility." I stood up and hugged him. It was a long hug, full of love and redemption. "Uncle Jack." He chuckled softly. "It took me a while to hear that. Your father has been waiting for this day from heaven, I'm sure of it." When I hugged him, I felt something different, an ancestral strength, a love that transcended time. It was as if all the Hayes, living and dead, were there in that embrace. "Richard left you something," he said, wiping away tears. "It's in this box." I opened it slowly. Inside was an antique gold necklace, with a cross-shaped pendant and an inscription on the back, "The truth will set you free." It was the same phrase my father wrote in his letters. Jack held the necklace and placed it in my hands. "Your father wanted you to know, the wealth he left you is not in vaults, but in the faith that is passed down from generation to generation." I looked at him, and for the first time I felt complete peace. There were no more questions, no pain, no fear. Only gratitude. "And now, what's going to happen?" I asked. "Now you live, Emily. Love, forgive, and honor the name you bear. Because the haze time of hiding is over." The wind blew, swaying the curtains. The sound of the old living room clock chimed 12 times. Midnight. The end of an era. Jack turned to leave, but before crossing the threshold, he looked back and said, "Oh, and one more thing. You're not the only heiress." I froze. "What do you mean?" He smiled enigmatically. "Richard left a part of everything for me too. But not in money, in a mission. My part is to see you happy." And he left, leaving me alone in the room, with the necklace gleaming in my hands and the feeling that, for the first time, everything was exactly where it should be. The past had been revealed. Love had triumphed. And the Hayes name was finally at peace. But deep down, I knew, God still had one more lesson to teach me, a lesson about forgiveness, legacy, and eternity. The following morning, the sun streamed through the windows of the Hayes mansion as if the sky itself wanted to illuminate this new beginning. The house seemed to breathe again. The curtains moved gently, and the sound of birds mingled with the distant echo of the wind coming from the fields. I woke up with a lightness I had never felt before. I walked barefoot through the hallways, touching the walls as if recognizing a forgotten home. It was strange to think that this place, with its crystal chandeliers and gilded paintings, now belonged to me. But deep down, I knew, it had always been mine. On the living room table, I found a note left by Jack. His handwriting, firm and simple, read, "Emily, the world will call you an heiress, but God calls you chosen. Use what you have received to heal, not to hurt." I smiled. It sounded like a goodbye, and part of me knew it was. I spent the whole day opening rooms, discovering objects that told fragments of the story of a man I only knew through words and faith. Each book, each photograph, each memory was a silent conversation with my father. At dusk, I walked to the garden. The sky was golden, and the wind carried the scent of the flowers he himself had planted years before. I sat on the stone bench and closed my eyes. For the first time, I felt peace. Suddenly, I heard the sound of the old engine. Jack's yellow bus was coming down the dirt road. He stopped in front of the gate, waved, and I ran to him. "You're not going to leave without saying goodbye, are you?" I asked, smiling. He came down slowly, still wearing the same worn cap and with a tired smile. "I came to see you one last time, girl." "Last time?" He nodded. "My time here is over. I fulfilled my promise to your father. Now it's up to you to continue." I tried to hold back the tears, but I couldn't. "You're all I have, Jack." He placed his hand on my shoulder. "No, Emily. You have something no one can take away from you, the truth. And with it, you can change the world." The wind blew strongly, making the leaves dance around us. The sunset painted the sky red and gold. It seemed like a farewell written by God himself. "I will never forget you," I whispered. He smiled. "There's no need. Because I will always be there for everything you do, every act of kindness, every act of forgiveness you offer." We were silent for a moment. Then he handed me a small envelope. "Your father wrote this for when you were ready to say goodbye." I opened it slowly. Inside there was only one sentence, handwritten. "Love doesn't die, it changes form." My chest tightened. Tears streamed down my face, but there was a smile in them. Jack turned around, climbed onto the bus, and started the engine. "Take good care of the name you carry, Miss Hayes." "And you, Jack, where are you going?" I asked, as he closed the door. "To the road that God shows me." The bus drove off slowly, kicking up golden dust under the last glimmer of sunlight. I stood there, watching the vehicle disappear around the bend, the same bus where it all began, now carrying away the last link to the past. When the sound of the engine faded, I looked up at the sky and murmured, "Thank you, God, for showing me that even pain has a purpose." In the following days, I transformed the mansion into a shelter for orphaned children. He wanted that place, which once symbolized wealth and power, to now become a home of hope. Old school rivals Madison and Claire showed up at the gate one day. They were both different, without their arrogance, without the makeup of pride. Shyly, they asked to speak with me. "Emily, we came to ask for forgiveness." I looked at them tenderly. "You don't need to ask. I forgave you a long time ago. Your hatred taught me to love more strongly." They cried. And, in that unlikely embrace, I realized that forgiveness is the most precious miracle, the one that only a heart prepared by pain can offer. Time passed, and the name Hayes once again became synonymous with kindness. People said I was a $100 million heiress, but deep down, I knew my inheritance was love. One night, I went to the cemetery to visit my father's grave. I brought white flowers and the cross-shaped necklace. The moonlight illuminated the letters of his name, Richard Hayes, and, for a moment, the wind seemed to whisper my name. I knelt down and prayed. "Father, the promise has been fulfilled. Your name lives, and your love has brought me this far." As the tears fell, I felt an indescribable peace. It was as if two presences surrounded me, Richard's and Jack's, watching, silent and proud. I stood up, looked at the starry sky, and realized that the journey had come to an end. But the end was not sadness, it was purpose. And as I left the cemetery, the wind blew gently, raising golden dust under the moonlight. It sounded like the distant roar of an old engine, the same one that had accompanied me from the beginning. I smiled, my heart full of faith, and whispered, "The humble will be exalted, and the exalted will one day learn the value of humility." I walked down the road in silence, carrying with me the necklace, the name, and the story that God wrote with crooked lines, but perfectly straight in the eyes of heaven. Sometimes, God uses the most painful humiliations to build the most beautiful miracles. Emily believed that poverty was her prison, but, in the end, she discovered it was merely the cocoon where her faith grew in silence. The world rejected her, mocked her, made her cry for 5 years. But when God's time came, no cruel word could erase what was already written in heaven. The invisible girl became the heiress. But not 100 million, rather a legacy of love, forgiveness, and purpose. And perhaps that is the true wealth, to be able to forgive even when the world has hurt you, to love when everything inside you wants to give up, and to keep the faith when no one else believes anymore. Now I want to ask you, from the heart, have you ever felt like Emily, humiliated, forgotten, invisible, thinking that God has forgotten you? What if, in fact, He was simply preparing you for the moment when everyone would see the light He placed within you? Think about it. How many times have you thought it was the end, only to realize it was just the beginning of something bigger? Emily's story isn't about money. It's about hope regarding the certainty that the humble will be exalted and that no one can erase what God writes. Before I go, I want to ask you a simple favor. If this story touched your heart, if you felt something different while listening, I invite you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications, not just to support the work, but to continue receiving messages that touch the soul. And more than that, may God bless you deeply with health, faith, joy, and courage. May He show you, in due time, that no pain is in vain, and that there is always a hidden purpose behind what seems unfair. Because the love that moved Emily's life is the same love that moves yours. And as long as there is faith, there will be a new beginning.